Hello, this is Tom Sidener, and in this video I am going to show you how to install Xamarin on Visual Studio 2015. Now, first of all, I'd like to mention a couple things. The first thing is that the easiest way to run Xamarin with Visual Studio is to use the latest version of Visual Studio, and the latest version right now is 2017, and I'm going to show you how to do that really quick. That's a super simple method. If you have 2015, all you have to do is create a new project. When you go to create a new project, you're going to pick Android. At this point, you're actually going to think that you can do Android development in 2015 natively, but you can't. You're going to pick this, give it a name. I'll just call it Xamarin 1, and then I'm going to say OK. And when this project comes up, it's actually going to give you a window here that gives you a link to download Xamarin. At this point, you think that you're going to download Xamarin and install it into your 2015, but that's not what's going to happen. When you go to this link, the link's going to ask you for a username and your email and everything for Xamarin. I'm assuming that that's so that they can contact you and bug you about buying stuff. What's really going to happen, and I'm going to shut this down because this is not registered. What's really going to happen is it's going to download and install Visual Studio Community 2017, and then it's going to install Xamarin within that. And so you're going to have Visual Studio 2015 and Visual Studio 2017 running on your machine, and that's fine, and that is really the easiest way to do it if you want to do it that way. But if you are insistent that you want to have Xamarin working in your Visual Studio 2015, I am now going to show you how you can do that. The first thing you have to do is you have to modify, if you've already got it installed, your Visual Studio 2015. I'm going to assume that you do, so here you go. First thing you're going to do is you're going to click on Start. You're going to go to Control Panel. You're going to go where it says Programs, and you're going to click on Uninstall a Program. You are going to find Visual Studio 2015. And then we're going to click Change. But before we do that, I want to mention the other couple things that I wanted to say before I start all this. The second thing is, other than it being easy to run in the latest version, is that this product takes a long time to install. So during this video, I'm going to be doing some stuff that's going to take an absorbent amount of time, and I'm going to cut a lot of that out. So when you're doing this process, if it seems to take you a lot longer than it did me, that's to be expected, because I'm not going to make you sit and through a video that's just things installing. So I'm going to be cutting out or compressing large amounts of this video. So just keep that in mind when you're doing your own setup. The third and final thing I want to note is this Xamarin is a storage hog. And I'm going to show you really quick how much storage I have. You can see that I have 68 gigabytes free right now, and when I finish this I'm going to have a lot less, and then you'll be able to do the math, because I'll show you at the end how much is free, and you'll have an idea of how much this took me to install. But you need to have at least, I'm pretty sure, at least 30 to 40 gig free in order to do this, and we'll calculate at the end and see how it is. So keep those things in mind, and now we're going to go ahead and move forward. So I'm going to select my Visual Studio 2015, and I'm going to click Change, and it's going to bring up the installer for Visual Studio. This will take a couple minutes to come up, depending on your configuration. So once this gets to this part here where you can modify, repair, or uninstall, we're going to do Modify. We need to go into the cross-platform mobile development, so we're going to hit this here, and then we're going to select C#.NET Xamarin. It's going to select everything here, and then also select some stuff automatically in the common tools and software development kits, and that's what we want. And then we're going to hit Next, and then we are going to say to update, and then this is going to take quite a bit of time to actually download and install, so I am going to modify this so you don't have to watch all of this, and I'll be back once it's at a point where we can move forward. Okay, so now that this section is completed, you're going to note that it was unable to set up the appropriate API here, and we are going to go ahead and do that in a next step. So we can go ahead and close this out, and now we can also close out this control panel as well. I'm going to go ahead and leave this. You can see now we are at 67.8 gigabytes free. I'm going to minimize that and bring it back up later. So the next thing we have to do is we have to fix that Android API error. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our C drive. We are going to go into Program Files 86. We are going to find Android, and we are going to go into the Android SDK. And then we're going to go into where it says Tools, and we are going to look for the Android batch file. So it's right here, and we're going to double click on that. And this is going to run the SDK manager and is going to allow us to fix those errors that we got previously in the upgrade of Visual Studio. This will take a couple seconds to actually check and see what we have and what the newest stuff is. We are not going to put the newest stuff on here. We're going to do 23, which is what the Visual Studio was trying to install itself that it couldn't. So I'm going to uncheck the API 27 and uncheck this API 27. We are going to go ahead and install the tools at revision 24, so that's fine. So we're going to leave that. But we're going to go down here to API 23. We're going to expand that, and we're going to select everything in here. Now, if you're hurting for space, you can eliminate some of these system images if you want. I'm going to do them all because I think I have plenty of space, but you've got your TV and your wearable, which is a watch and stuff. You could eliminate those if you'd like. Also, depending on what machine you have, you might want to eliminate, the ARM. I have to install the ARMs because this machine is running on a virtual machine, and the emulator will not run the Intel version because the Intel version requires Haxum, and Haxum is a hypervisor, and I'm already running in a hypervisor, and you can't run two hypervisors together. So, but if you're running this on a physical machine, I highly recommend you also go down here and check mark the Haxum installer and go ahead and install Haxum, because what will happen is Haxum will run a hypervisor that will in turn run your Intel 86 system images, and your emulators will run much, much, much faster. It's painfully slow if you're running on the ARM versions that don't use the Haxum, but that's up to you. But I highly recommend, if you're not running on a virtual machine, to go ahead and install this Haxum accelerator as well. I can't do that, so I'm not even going to bother to check mark it. But I'm going to go ahead and check mark these Android SDK tools that were already check marked, and then I'm going to select everything in the API 23 because I'm pretty sure I have plenty of space for it. Once you have everything selected, then you're just going to go ahead and click Install 19 Packages. You do have to accept the license, so you can highlight the top here and accept the license, and it will accept the license for all of them. If you highlight each individual one, you can accept the license for that as well if you just like, for some reason, to do them individually, but I find it much easier to do them all. And once they're all accepted, then you're going to do an install, and this is going to take some time as well, but this is going to go ahead and install the Revision 23 API and the Android tools on your machine, and I'll be back when this part is done. Okay, so now that everything from the Google SDK has been installed, then we're going to say, okay, it's telling us that we should restart this SDK manager, but we're going to shut it down and restart it anyway later on. So we're going to say, okay, we're going to make sure that everything got installed, and it did. So everything's installed that we selected. Remember, I didn't install the Haxum driver, but you should install the Haxum driver if you're running this on an Intel-based machine that you want to accelerate the emulator. Okay, so we're done with this part. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to start up our Visual Studio 2015. And because it was unable to install the SDK when it actually was doing the update, it wasn't able to tell it where the SDK was. So we're going to have to do that manually, and that's what we're going to do next. I would also like to note at this point where we're at in the storage area for our machine. We are now down to 24 gigabytes free, so you can see how much space that actually took up. It takes up a lot. Okay, once we're back in our Visual Studio, we are going to go into Tools. We're going to go down to Options. We're going to scroll all the way down here to the Xamarin. We're going to hit the little down arrow here, and we're going to click on the Xamarin itself. And you're going to see that, oh, it did pick up our SDK location. This may not pick up for you. If it does not pick up for you, then go ahead and click change. But for me, it did pick up. But in previous installations, it did not pick up the SDK location. So you want to make sure that that is the case. Once we have this location set, the next thing we have to do is upgrade Xamarin, because Xamarin doesn't install here with the latest version. So we're going to go to Other. And we're going to check now for updates for Xamarin. And it's going to find a newer version. And it says ready to download. So we're going to go ahead and download that. So that's the next thing we have to do. Okay, once the download's complete, the next thing I want to do is I want to install the new version of Xamarin. So I'm just going to hit install. It's going to actually bring up an install program outside of Visual Studio. And that's actually good, because Visual Studio has to be shut down in order for this process to complete properly. I tried this once and it came up and it said, do you want to shut down Visual Studio? And I said yes, and then it didn't shut it down, and then it failed the installation. So make sure when you're at this point, you go back and you just cancel out of here and you shut down your Visual Studio before you continue on with upgrading your Xamarin. I'm going to say next here. Now that my Visual Studio is shut down, I'm going to accept the terms of the license agreement. I'm going to hit next, and then I'm going to hit next again, and I'm going to install, and it's going to go ahead and go through another lengthy process where it installs the new version of Xamarin. You can kind of get an idea if you go back to the beginning of this video and check out the timestamp here, what time it is. You can kind of get an idea of how long this process actually took me to complete. It's not going to be that long in the video because I'm shortening it up, but it will give you an idea of how long you can expect to spend doing this. Now, my machine is a moderately fast machine, but I've also done this on a machine that's extremely fast, and it's still not fast on that machine as well. Okay, so now that this part is finished, we're getting very close to a completed installation, but we do have one other thing that we have to fix, and I'm going to show you what that is right now. So I'm going to go ahead and go back into my Visual Studio 2015. I'm going to select New Project. I'm going to make sure I select Android and a blank application, and I'm just going to call this Android 1. And I'm going to hit OK. And at this point, it should go ahead and create an Android development suite here with everything I need. It does give me a getting started with Xamarin page here. All of my stuff here is where it should be. The main things that I'm going to want to be working with is the main activity CS. So that's going to be my source code. And then under my resources and layouts is going to be my main XML. That's going to be my main screen. Now, here's the last issue that we have to fix. What's going to happen is it's going to try to render the emulator in this main, and we're going to get a rendering error. The reason that we're getting a rendering error is because this version of Xamarin requires Java 1.8, and we currently have Java 1.7, so we need to update that now. So we're going to go ahead and X out of this main XML, but we're going to go ahead and minimize the Visual Studio. And then we're going to go out to the web and we're going to download a version of Java 1.8. And then we need the Java 1.8 SDK, I should have said. And we're going to go here to the Oracle site, and we're just going to go ahead and download the version for our machine. We are running on a Windows 64-bit machine, so I'm going to download this. You do have to make sure you accept the license agreement, so I'm going to click that, and then I'm going to download the 64-bit version for Windows. It's going to take a second to download. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run this. And this is going to install version 1.8 onto my machine. Once it's ready, I'm just going to hit next, and then next again, and it's going to go ahead and install Java for me. I'm going to go ahead and let it put it in this location. This is fine, so I'm going to say next. Okay, so now that the Java installation is complete, I'm going to go ahead and close this. I can get rid of my browser here. I'm going to go back into Visual Studio 2015. I'm going to go up to Tools. I'm going to go to Options. I'm going to scroll down here to Xamarin. I'm going to select Xamarin. And then I'm going to change my Java Development Kit location here. So I'm going to click on this button here. And I'm going to go into Program Files, Java, and then I'm going to select the 1.8 SDK. So here we go. And hit OK. And say OK here. And now I'm going to bring my main XML back up. And it's going to attempt to render my emulator here. And as you can see, it is now able to render an emulator here. You can change the emulators. It's set for Nexus 4 right here, but you can change it to all kinds of stuff. One of the interesting ones is they do have some like watches and stuff that you can install. But like I said, we want a Nexus 6. We can change to that emulator as well. And there you go. So the only other thing that you need to do to make this work is you need to have a emulator set up. To do that, you go to Tools, you go to Android, you go to Emulator Manager. The Emulator Manager will open in a separate window, and then you will need to create an emulator to run on your machine. Sometimes this is trial and error. I can create one here just to show you. I'm not going to run it because it'll take forever, but you can put in here like phone. You pick a device. I'm going to pick a Nexus 1 here. Let's see. There we go. The target, and you're going to pick your target. If you you can either pick the Google APIs or the Android APIs. I like to pick the Google. And then this one says that there's no system image for it, so I do have to pick the other one. And there we go. I'll pick a system image, and I'll pick the ARM Amoeba because I do not have the Haxam installed. It'll ask you for a skin. I like to pick the one with the controls on the side. You can tell it about cameras and RAM and all that stuff, and then when you're done, you're going to hit OK. This process actually takes a little longer than you think it should. At least it does on this machine. Okay, once it's created, It should show up in your available devices here. We can shut this down now. And now when you go here to actually push the play button, eventually this will update and show you the emulators that you have available. I did end up restarting my Visual Studio 2015 to stimulate this to go ahead and update to my emulator, but now you can see my emulators there that I created. And then if I do something here, like I can go into my toolbox and grab a button, throw a button onto my emulator. And then if I run it, then what it's going to do is it's going to attempt to start up the emulator and then send the APK to that emulator for testing. You can see that it's currently building, and in a second it's going to attempt to start the emulator. I'm not going to let it start completely up because mine takes a while to start on this virtual machine because I can't use the accelerator. But if you're using the accelerator, it should come up fairly quickly and you should be able to test things on that emulator. So as you can see, the emulator has popped up here. It takes a while for it to actually send the OS over to the emulator and for it to actually send the APK over and all that stuff, and I don't feel like waiting for all that, so I'm going to cut it off here, but you can see that it will actually start your emulator and start it functioning. This is the skin I added, which gives you some options on the side. You don't have to add that, that's an option, but I'm going to go ahead and shut this down, so when you're done testing you can shut it down, it goes back, and so it does work. So there is a complete installation of the 2015 with the Xamarin. Here is the final total on space. I have 26.2 gigabytes free, so you can calculate that up and see what I had for space originally. And this is my total time, so you can check my start time against my end time to find out how long it took me to do. But there you go. I hope that helps. If you're wanting to integrate Xamarin with your 2015 Visual Studio, that's how you have to do it. It's a long, drawn-out process, but it does work. And then from then on, you can just run it like you normally would. And as always, if you guys have any questions at all, please feel free to email me or post comments in the comments below. I always answer my emails, and I try to always answer my comments. I hope this was helpful if you decide to install Xamarin in Visual Studio 2015. And until I see you guys again, happy computing.